Hey, it's Juanita, and you are listening to Unboxed, because behind the scenes is the real story. I hope you're good and taking care of yourself. This voice note, I wanted to talk to you about qualification. If you're someone who's interested in starting a business and is wondering whether or not it's something that you should or shouldn't be doing. Why, are you ready for that kind of thing? Now, my business at the time of writing this is 8 years old. And I'm really proud of that because they say most businesses fail in the first 5 years. And I remember when we turned 5, sitting in this very office in my home and recording a video of gratitude because I was so grateful that I'd managed to make it. And I think for a lot of people around me at the time, I think they appreciated the achievement, the pivot. So I used to work in housing, I've worked in education, anywhere where I can support people. That's where I've really wanted to be. And since I left that industry and went into working for myself and working with talent, so if you don't already know, I run an agency, communications, PR, marketing. PR not so much, to be honest. I'm taking a step back from that. It's a brutal industry, so shout out to the publicists, but events, communications, internal comms is my favorite, and also managing talent, being part of what I call their business development team. Anyway, so as I transitioned out, I often get asked questions about what it's like to run a business. Sometimes people are incredulous about it. Like I had an old boss and he wanted to hire me to do a Black History Month program for the organisation that he worked for. And a member of my team at the time reached out to him and, there was stuff that we'd already talked about, the core stuff. And I was like, Joe, you handle that part of things because it doesn't really need me. I just need to focus on connecting, delivering the rest. And he reached out to me, my boss, and he said, "Oh, is Joe a real person?" And I laughed. This is the thing that you've got to be mindful of. I think, to be fair, it could be a very innocuous statement. But I think it's also reflective and betraying of the person when sometimes when people ask you questions, it's like, oh, this is where you saw me. It wasn't possible for me to have support in whatever guise that is, not just be me in my business. I've got people around me. Anyway, what I really wanted to talk about here is a lot of people will come to me and they say, Juanita, we've seen you've done it. It looks like you're doing well. How are you doing it? And this is particularly true of women. I think I've had one man thinking about it. Super stellar, talented young man asked me, my advice about navigating business and that kind of thing. It tends to be a lot of women, particularly women, quote unquote, of a certain age, will say, oh, I want to run a business, but I don't know how to do it. And what I ultimately always tell them is that you've been running a business anyway. I mean, depending on the type of career you've had, but primarily, even if you've been working for someone else, if you have been put in a position of leadership, whether that's for a project, a department, your skills that you are forced to cultivate in order to achieve success are transferable. Now, there's a part of me in my brain that's thinking back to a recent Stephen Bartlett interview with two guys called Daniel Priestley, and who I adore, and another guy called Gary Stevenson, where they're debating about this thing of, you just can't tell everybody that entrepreneurship is for them. You've got to be real. In fact, I write about Gary Stevenson on my website, and that entrepreneurship element. So you can see that on my personal website, and I'll put that in the notes, in the description below. But yeah, everyone is not built for entrepreneurship. They're not. However, if something is sparked in you and you're like, I really want to do this, but I am not sure I have the skill sets to do it. Particularly if you've had a long-standing career, please, can I be the one to tell you, go do what you need to do. If it is in your spirit, if it's a calling, I'm not going to say to you it's easy. Let's be real. Yeah, it's not easy. Even the other day, I've been doing this, 8 years in this business, contracting before that. I had another business before that I ran for 4 years. So, even the other day, I was hearing someone online saying, actually, people miss the fact that you're not necessarily going to run a business and then it's going to be an Amazon, or even some of the kind of mid-level businesses. It might not necessarily make millions upon millions of pounds, and you have to decide between, am I looking to build a business to scale that's going to, have lots of offices, lots of people, lots of policies and procedures, and, am I doing it on this expansive scale, or if it's what they call a lifestyle business. So it's it does enough to make sure that I can live and have a good life with those I love, do the things that I want to do. Does it give me time back? Does it fuel me and serve me? So those are the kind of analyses that you have to make. But your skill sets, I've got a couple of my loved ones in mind when I think about, we've had sessions where we've sat down and talked about their business aspirations, and having to remind them. Now, these are highly, highly accomplished women, senior women, money isn't an accomplishment, but they are definitely in those spaces where they're in the upper thousands, if not six figures, roles, working at the top of their game, making shed loads of money for other people. And there's a fear about them doing the same for themselves. So I suppose what I want to say to you is that if there's any part of you, I'm not saying risk it all, make strategic, thoughtful, calculated decisions. I when I started my business, my eldest son was 2 or 3. I had been working for a large education body, and we were understaffed, but they were making us reapply for our jobs. We were understaffed, but they were making us reapply for our jobs. And I just thought to myself, do you know what? I can do this myself. I really can just do this myself. I do not need to be in this environment where you're pressuring me to do the work, but then you also want to add an extra layer of pressure by making me reapply, our team reapply for our jobs. And so I decided I wasn't going to go through the process. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend what I did next to people. And I can also understand, I think when you're younger, and it was when I started TGRG, I think, actually. Was it? Yeah. No, it wasn't. It was it? I can't remember right now. But, it's the decision, the choices that I made were very risky. So I left instability. I chose my brand of instability. That's what we're going to call it. Do I want to be unstable in an organization that puts pressure on me anyway, at the risk of them coming to me and saying, actually, I don't know what the outcome would have been? Or do I want to take control of my circumstances? And I decided to take control. So I left, and I remember having my leaving drinks on the Friday, and then I woke up Monday morning, and I was lying in bed with my 3-year-old. I was lucky enough to have come back home. So I was at home. So I did have that support mechanism. So I think that's really important to note. And I woke up that Monday morning and I was like, I've got no clients, no business plan. I just have my skills. And interestingly, that morning, I got a phone call from someone who I'd met in passing. And she said, look, I'm looking for someone to come and write some profiles, to do some profiles for my clients. So she too actually, essentially was a talent manager. And it was like, look, you just come and sit down with them, interview them, talk to them about why they do what they do, write it up, and I'll pay you. That very same morning, I wasn't expecting a call. We hadn't had a conversation about it. And as I'm telling you the story, I think to myself, see, this is why people say sometimes you've got to take the leap and get out of your own way in order for other things to come in. Because I've continued to be self-employed ever since, So I suppose I really want this to be a message to people. I mean, what I'm saying is not the blueprint for running a business. There's so many different components, so many different conversations. And if there are particular aspects you want me to talk about, then let me know and we can do that. But I think what I'm talking to is the imposter syndrome element. Should I be doing this? Can I do this? If you can run a department, if you can run a project, even if you are not a senior leader in your workplace, but you can successfully go from point A to B and deliver, there are opportunities for you to run a business. Again, I'm not saying chuck in your job straight away. Again, calculated, thoughtful decisions when you're doing it. But do not underestimate your skill sets. And one of the things I'll say to women, particularly women over 40, is that do not underestimate the power of the experience that you've had already. Your knowledge is invaluable. And in a way, it almost gives you a bit of a advantage over, because I see a lot of young people in, their early 20s, early 30s who are running really successful businesses. And I look at them, I'm like, how did you get there? I congratulate them on that, but I'm interested in just understanding, because business isn't age dependent, but there is something in you recognizing your ability your work history, your contributions that have come before you. So yeah, do not underestimate the power of your already lived experiences to be able to help you deliver whatever business you desire, you know? So yeah, that's what I wanted to say in this voice note to you. If you've got any questions or thoughts or comments, you know I'm always open to hearing them. I really want to hear from you because this is meant to be, I hope it to be a two-way conversation, not just me talking at you. But yeah, get in touch in whichever way feels comfortable with you. Have a look in the description or in the description for our for the podcast or for the episode, and just let me know what your thoughts are. And yeah, until the next voice note.